mean, maybe we are able to recover quicker, but that's kind of why we're doing the study. But we physically won't tell the doctor, like, hey, you got to get them out now. Like, we won't affect any of their other care, just their temperature within the first 2 to 5 days. That's
Does
it.
the heartbeat slow down when you cool this off? Does that help?
It can.
Metabolism.
Yeah, it can kind of slow everything down. You don't see a major slowing of the heart rate at the temperatures we're doing. If you go much lower than that, it can really slow it down. It's there's a lot of so many other things are going on with your body. We won't let your heart rate get too slow. We can give medicines to increase it. So in that critical situation, if it gets too low, it's usually from another reason, not just the cooling by itself. But you're right, if you went and jumped, in Lake Michigan right now or something, it'll slow your heart rate down and your breathing down.
Seems like that would just slow down the flow of blood, which would help you not fill up as fast, if your heart rate was going a little slower.
Sort of. It probably won't. You don't see that big of change with how your heart will be pumping. It'll still be pumping just as much.
Elaine, do you have a question?
Yes, first and foremost, it was an awesome presentation, I learned a lot. And I have, you mentioned in the heart world, they do the cooling, and I do have a dear friend that's what saved his life. So it makes a lot of sense that it would help there.
Yeah, so when patients have a heart attack, like I said, the same thing happens. It's a different mechanism. The injury is different. The injury that happens to your brain is different. Instead of getting hit on the outside of the head, now you're not getting blood and oxygen to the brain for a period of time. It only takes about 4 minutes for your heart not beating to there start being damage being done to your brain. And really it's probably less time than that. So that's why they preach, CPR and do it in the community. And as soon as you see somebody go down, just start doing chest compressions, because the whole goal of that is just to try and continue getting blood to your brain.
Moving it around.
Yeah.
And the question that came to me when you were talking about all that and removing part of the skull and maybe not putting it back till as long as a month down the road, where is that housed? The piece of the skull.
There's 2 places we can actually do it, and the actual most common is they put it in your stomach. In the cavity, it's not really your stomach, I say your stomach, but it's in the abdomen. And so they just sort of slip it in there, right in the cavity, and it sits there. And the reason why that is,
The skull, this is?
yeah,
skull.
so the piece of skull
Piece that they remove.
When they start that?
No,
Mike, all right, I know they question and answer, but
No, Alex is right on, as an advocate, I'm gonna tell you, it didn't happen to me, my friend Molly Welch, who was gonna be here
my
today.
cousin had it.
Molly had
Put it in the freezer.
a part of her brain removed, put in her skull. Gabby Giffers, part of her head, put in her skull. Bob Woodruff, part of his head, put it in the abdomen. And
What year is this? My cousin's was put in a freezer.
So there's two different ways. We can do it in the
alright.
freezer too.
Yeah.
It'll still be okay if there's a reason not to do it. Sometimes there is a reason not to do it in the abdomen. The reason we put it in the abdomen is because your brain, the skull is a piece of bone and still does require.
It won't attack itself.
It doesn't attack itself,
Yeah.
and there's still a blood supply that'll start going and nurturing that piece of skull, and it also keeps it clean. So you have less risk, in a freezer. Like I said, there's bacteria and stuff all over everywhere, and even at our best case, keeping it
Learn a
clean.
lot. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
hmm
No,
I have a
Jim?
question for Alex.
yeah, Bill, go ahead.
Alex, I was looking at this diagram right up here, and before my disabling surgery in 1991, I had my first craniotomy in 1973, and they put in a VP shunt to just a bit high for self-lift. And then I had a shunt revision, and I did a VA shunt.
So the VP shunt's a little bit different, and it helps drain some of that spinal fluid
Right.
constantly. We do it a lot in kids as well, if they have a different type of brain abnormality where too much of this fluid accumulation. So if you get too much fluid in this area in your brain, it'll push from the inside out and cause too much pressure.
Yeah.
So we can put a shunt that sort of goes down, that'll leak into your stomach sort of in the same area and leak out in a different location and sort of constantly keeps that normal pressure in your ventricles right there in your brain. And we don't typically do it a lot in brain injuries anymore unless they have some hydrocephaly or too much water buildup in your brain. We can put the exterior shunt until your brain heals and pull some of that stuff out.
Okay, what I want Alex you to go back over is the applied consent, okay? And
Right.
I want you to really explain this because I'm gonna explain it to a lot of people up north, all over the country, even in Europe, because I got some friends in Europe I talk to all the time about this stuff. On the internet, but when you say applied consent, give me a Joe Blow goes in there, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically it's just the exception from informed consent is we're not asking anyone's permission right away. So there's not really a discussion that's ever had because you're getting whisked away to surgery so quickly.
Yeah.
When family does show up, we will then talk to them about the study and if that's something they want to continue to do.
Got it.
So at any point in time after family shows up, we will explain the study to them, why we're cooling or why we're doing this or that. And the family can say, no, I don't want to be any part of this, and we'll stop right then.
Got it.
And we'll just do normal care.
Yep.
But usually the patient will never be able, in the first 5 days especially, awake enough to ever provide any consent. So it's always the family making the decision, or the next of kin that shows up. So it's a special rule that the FDA and the sort of governing bodies of research have allowed for research to take place without consent, and it's only done in emergency situations.
Cool.
This is
Very good.
actually our 4th trial at Emory and Grady, where we've done this type of research.
Already,
Yeah.
okay. Now, with that said, okay, any feedback, any testimonial information?
So there's been a lot of studies about this, about what patients think about being involved in this type of research, and when they wake up, they're fine with it. And definitely their outcome, like if they survive from it, they're more positive about it, so that definitely impacts it. But there's been a lot of research done about these types of studies, and the reason why these are done too is, like Alex was saying, when you're brought in for an emergency, there's been a lot of research that shows that when patients are described research to them, they don't understand it. It's very complicated. It's taken us almost an hour to talk about it here. I mean, imagine being in a critical situation and having a minute, 2 minutes to understand everything we just talked about. So patients don't understand it. So there's been a lot of debate whether you even need consent, depending on the type of trial. So ultimately, a lot of patients want to know the information, and that's why, like Alex said, we let the family know as soon as possible, and they have the option at that point to say yes or no. But a lot of patients are okay with being in this type of study. There's been a lot of research done because you kind of are balancing the autonomy and the ability to give a decision with the fact that if we couldn't do this type of research, we wouldn't be able to do emergency medicine research. And we need new treatments. It's been 23 years for some people, and we're still doing the same thing. So we need new treatments, and that's why we get to do this type of research.
Okay, a question I got, has the Department of Defense, have they done this at Landstuhl at all?
Not this particular, the Department of Defense has funded different things.
Sure.
This is hard to do in a battlefield situation.
Do you mean hypothermia or do you
Well,
mean
no,
EFIC?
well, hypothermia, because
Okay.
when you're injured, when you're IED injured or penetrating TBI injured in Kabul, you go to the triage, then from Kabul, you fly to Landstuhl in West Germany. And West Germany, Landstuhl, is where a lot of these procedures go on. Now, I'm a Navy veteran, so I represent veterans.
So, blast injuries,
Yeah.
are sort of a different mechanism, and they don't frequently cause this type of bleeding. What you see is a widespread damage to your brain, and then if there's shrapnel that hits or goes through your skull, that's totally different. Now you've got foreign objects, just like a gunshot. So it's hard to. We've not, in our previous evidence, seen that this hypothermia will work for all types of brain injury, and we don't think that's the case. 'Cause there's too much different types of damage and too